It's great to be here with you all digitally tonight. I'm going to go into my screen share now and hopefully fluidly just show you this presentation. So thank you again for having me. As Rick mentioned, I have no disclosures to make or any conflicts of interest for that portion. This is me before barbershops closed. The haircut has gotten a little bit out of style here. I am the lead for teenmentalhealth.org. Teenmentalhealth.org was started by psychiatrist Dr. Steven Kuchar about closing in on 15 years now. I've been working with him since about the last 8. He has retired and joined the Canadian Senate and has graciously gifted the intellectual property to Alberta Health Services, and I've taken over as lead. I am come to this as a former school-based mental health therapist, working very closely in collaboration with the RCSD, where I was making referrals to primary care as well as psychiatry for children kindergarten through grade 12. This is a bit of my background. Today, I just want to talk very briefly about vulnerabilities. We're going to go through this very quickly. Some impacts of social isolation on family systems. Some of the effects that I'm a little concerned about in the media, a model for mental health literacy that we use with teachers, parents, and students. Whenever we get them in a room with us, we teach them this model. I'm going to give you a really quick rundown on it tonight. And I think it's worth the time, the 4 minutes, to show you one of our videos on stress and the stress response. It's certainly applicable. It was written at the start of the pandemic, not to be pandemic specific, but it has a lot of application. And I'm hoping, I know everybody may be feeling resourced to death, but I'm going to hopefully show you a few that potentially you haven't seen yet. So we're going to go through quickly. I know that you guys had a great presentation last week from Dr. Berg, who talked about clinical presentation, so I'm not going to go too deep on this. We're really worried about pre-existing vulnerabilities, and if I can sum it all up, I'd be saying I'm worried. The kids I was worried about before this happens is the ones I'm worried about while it's happening, and the ones that I'm going to be worried about their return. Pre-existing vulnerabilities like substance use, pre-existing mental disorders, self-harming behaviors, access to care. We're really concerned about when families start to self-isolate together and become closed systems. If they were closed systems already, the potential for family violence, domestic abuse is strong. Increased barriers in accessing care. The schools, since have been closed, we've lost one of our major conduits into the pathway of care. We have less eyes on adolescents and youth, and we need to pay particularly close attention. I've been working very closely with school boards talking about how do you do some of the identification that they have been doing in a virtual and online setting, and it is challenging. We may be seeing symptom exacerbation. Again, this was mentioned last week. If you want to check out that webinar, I definitely would look at the Mental Health Minute there. Symptom exacerbation such as anxiety, depression, furthered by the isolation, but also some more nuanced ones like youth with ADHD, now in a homeschooling situation where parents are overrun and stressed by the amount that they have to work on schoolwork. This is a challenging environment for those youth with learning disabilities, etc. The loneliness factor, and of course, I'm noticing a big gap in digital literacy. I was working with a school board. Our materials are spread across the world indeed, but in North America here, I was chatting with 2 school divisions, one in South Carolina and one in Baltimore. The youth in Baltimore were sent home told to sign up for an email address, and the youth in South Carolina were handed Chromebooks to access their online classes. So that digital chasm is becoming very evident right now. We here closer to town with school-based teams are seeing some students taking to treatment online very easily. Others are really struggling with doing counseling in an online environment. We're having to remember that students are sharing bandwidth, devices with family members, and it's not always possible to get access, especially for those communities and individuals that have no access at all. One of the things that I've been noticing, and you may have been seeing this as well, is some of the reporting that's been coming out on the impacts on mental health of individuals during the pandemic. And this was an article that ran in the Star as well as in other places. It was citing a study that was also one of the partners was the Vanier Institute. Nearly half of adults age 18 or older reporting feelings of being anxious and nervous. We see the study found 72% of girls reported feeling sad or often, while 55% of boys did. I'm really concerned about this because later on in the article, when you dug a little deeper, they reported this. Feelings of joy were also reported, with 86% saying that they have often and sometimes felt happy since COVID-19. To me, the article title should be preferred headline, Canadian youth have a healthy and appropriate response to COVID-19 challenges. I think we're right on target for this. We do not need to make a mountain out of a molehill or a perceived problem where there is not. And I'm very concerned about the pathologizing of a very normal response here. And the youth are very attuned to the media, and I think they're particularly at risk of over media consumption. So I've looked very closely at limiting that. Here's another example, and you can find lots of them. This one's on UBC. This is, BBC. This is what is toxic productivity. So we're starting to give it a name. They have signs and symptoms of this that you can recognize in yourself. They include restlessness, working to the point where it causes impairment, feeling the pressure to be available online, and feelings of failure no matter how productive you are. So again, we're seeing this channel has treatments for toxic productivity. Again, not in the DSM, a little worried about how we're construing this. So one of the models that we teach youth, as I mentioned, parents, a really helpful way to think about this, and this is where we start square one with mental health literacy, is that everybody in the population falls somewhere on this pyramid. More at the bottom and fewer at the top. At the bottom, you've got no distress, no problem disorder. Those are times when you are relaxing with friends, or you're sleeping, or you're having a great day. The next level up is a mental distress, and mental distress is ubiquitous. This is prevalent in our everyday life. It is running late. It is having a poor internet connection during a Zoom meeting. It is conflict with family members. It's anything you could imagine. The following level up is a mental problem. This is when we encounter stressors that outstrip, at least temporarily, our problem-solving skills. Mental problems are typically environmental, and they can mimic signs and symptoms of disorders. Like a perfect example would be grief and loss. We understand why the brain is having those kinds of feelings, and we're having that kind of response. If you get a divorce in your family, you may have a mental problem, but it is not a disorder. It is not an illness. It's not in need of psychiatric intervention. COVID-19 and the isolation that's been a result, it falls squarely in that mental problem category. So we need to make sure that youth are viewing it that way. The top category, mental disorder, mental illness, is reserved for those with perturbation of usual brain function. We see something different going on in the brain. The nuanced part of this model is that you have to understand that people can be in all of these categories at the same time. So let's walk it through. You can have a mental disorder. Let's take a student with ADHD. We can be suffering from the effects of social isolation and have a mental problem. And we can have a homework due through homeschooling, and that's causing them distress. And sometimes they can forget all about it. So you don't have to work your way up and down the pyramid in order. You just exist in these various categories. And mental health happens at all levels of these categories. Somebody with a mental illness still has mental health. They don't lose mental health as a result of their disorder. Some people with mental disorders have better mental health than people without. So this is the model we teach people. It's a great way of understanding. It's pretty easy to explain. And it provides a lot of clarity for us and the populations that we work with, and we develop a shared literacy with it. I'm going to play this video right now. This is a good example about how we can frame some of the stress in our daily lives, but also when we're facing things like COVID. So this will just be about 4 minutes here.
How often do you hear people say, "I'm so stressed out right now," or "That makes me so anxious"? How many times have you said it yourself? We often confuse stress with anxiety, and this confusion has led many of us to become afraid of one of the most natural and important states of our physical and mental health, our stress response. It seems to make sense that if stress is such a big part of our lives, we ought to take some time to think about what stress actually is, and how we can manage it. It turns out that even how we think about the stress response has a big impact on how it affects us. Unfortunately, stress has developed a bit of a bad rap recently. And while there are certain types of stress that are not good for us, most of it is actually helpful. In fact, working through daily stressors is precisely how we build skills and resilience. It's time to start changing the conversation about stress. So let's say we have a big challenge in our environment, which is called a stressor. It could be an exam, a big assignment, or really most problems that we face. We start to feel the physical symptoms. They might be a racing heart, rapid breathing, body tension, or not sleeping. We're confronted by the challenge, and if we make it through, the stress response subsides or gradually goes away. Here's a map of a normal stress response. It may come on more quickly or gradually, but that's the general idea. The stress response is normal. It's actually our body's best effort to get us ready to face the challenges that come our way. Without some level of stress, we don't perform well. Same thing goes if we have too much. Now let's go back to when we first experienced the stress response. This is when we're at an important point where we can choose how we interpret those physical sensations. Let's call them path A and path B. On path A, we can think, I'm so stressed out. I'm overwhelmed. Here we go again. I can't handle this, or I'm not going to go. Or on path B, we can think, my body's telling me I have something to face. This could be tough, but I'll find a way to get through it. My body's helping me to get ready to face this. These are two very different interpretations. And it turns out your interpretation of the stressor is what really matters. If we avoid situations or things that cause the stress response, it may make us feel better in the short term, but when we encounter the challenge again in the future, it actually makes the stress response even worse. On the other hand, if you think through what's causing your stress response in the first place, what strategies or problem solving you can use to face the challenge head on, it will reduce the intensity of the stress response. This is how we adapt and learn new skills to use the next time. Although the path B way of thinking may not come as naturally, and facing stressors takes courage, the more you practice this approach, the easier it will become. While the physical sensations of the stress response and anxiety are similar, the outcome is very different. The hallmarks of an anxiety disorder are persistent avoidance and withdrawal, where it causes major impairment in your life. That's more than just a stress response. So, putting this all together, let's start by labeling stress for what it is. Stress response. It's normal. It's a motivator. It isn't anxiety or depression. It's just stress. Next, check your thinking and try to interpret stress as helpful. I'm going to build some new skills. My brain is ramping up to help me get through this. Then, ask yourself, how am I going to step up to the problem causing me stress? What strategies do I have, and who can I ask for help? And finally, you may choose a helpful stress management technique, such as box breathing, mindfulness, physical exercise, or something else. But remember, calming strategies ultimately provide temporary relief until you're able to face the stressor. So the more we understand our stress response, the easier it becomes to manage. For more information about stress and anxiety, check us out at teenmentalhealth.org.
So hopefully a more useful interpretation of what's currently going on, providing some normalization and validation of what people are experiencing rather than ending in pathology. I don't know how many resources you've received, so I don't need to add to the avalanche here. This can be found at our teenmentalhealth.org website. We have a COVID-19 response page that we've added on here. These are tips for reducing loneliness, maintaining social connection, or staying active, because we really try and solidify that understanding of the connection between what's good for your bicep is good for your brain and vice versa. We want to make sure that we're looking after the basics like sleep, scheduling, positive social connection, and exercise as the foundations for good mental health. Another resource here is a really good one, again, mentioning that closed systems and being concerned about family violence. This is about how to have conversations with youth, or at least leave the opening for conversations where we're concerned about family violence, and that's provided by UBC. It's directed to educators, but I think it's very applicable to primary care practitioners as well as anybody in frontline connections with kids situations. I'm guessing you've heard of this one, but this is CanReach. When it's operating, it's a great training for primary care physicians. It's about a weekend and some intense weekends and then some follow-up with phone consultations. And it really works to build capacity of primary care practitioners around some of the major mental illnesses. And then finally, one of my favorite resources is this one. This is again on our website, What is Evidence-Based Medicine? There is one for youth and there is one for the parents. And it teaches both parents and youth how to evaluate different types of treatments, how to digest media, how to ask and have clear conversations with physicians when they're talking about treatments. So a really nice one to download. It's an easy read. We're going to restyle the one for the youth because it's fallen a little bit out of date, but still good information. And it's got things like what every patient should ask their doctor. So helpful there. All of this stuff can be found on our website, which is teenmentalhealth.org, and then you can follow us on social media. If you're interested in the videos, we have one both for the stress response as well as an overview of mental health literacy. So hopefully that lands in the realm of usefulness for you. Back to you, Rick.
Thanks very much, Andrew. And I love the toxic productivity new diagnosis. I was teasing some of my online colleagues that I think that I might have induced that in a few people. So maybe we'll have you back in a couple of weeks to find out what the cure to toxic productivity is. So great practical session. I'd also point out there was some notes on the chat line about that video, which I thought was beautiful. All of the resources are going to be available on the Specialist Link website for those who have logged on, and maybe we'll see if we can get that specific video link taken off and made available for our family docs and our team members. Thanks very much, Andrew.